All right. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are while you are watching our Zoom video conference, or if you're watching online video recorded. I am David Dukas, and I'm the James A. Knight Chair of Humanities and Ethics in Medicine at Tulane University School of Medicine. And I also direct the program in medical ethics and human values. I'm very pleased to introduce our panel in a moment, who will be speaking on maintaining spirituality during a pandemic. The J.R. Williams Senior MD Class of 31 Endowed Lecture Fund was initiated in the fall of 2013. The endowment supports lectures on spirituality and health at Tulane University School of Medicine, focusing on the art of creating a compassionate and trusting relationship between patient and doctor. The series honors the legacy of J. Richard Williams, Sr., a Tulane University graduate who was a well-known and well-loved internist and oncologist in Selma, Alabama. From his family, it was relayed to us that Dr. Williams loved medicine and was the kind of doctor who would do anything for his patient. With an interest in the impact of spirituality on health, particularly on the positive impact of spirituality on the well-being and continued health of those who had suffered the loss of a loved one. The other thing that I wanted to convey to you all is we have recently started in May a Master of Science in Bioethics and Medical Humanities. And as an FYI for our audience, we have an upcoming information session on our MS program in Bioethics and Medical Humanities. It will occur on February 5th, 2021 at noon Central Time. And you can register in advance for this session rather than the very long URL that I was sent. I crunched it into a bit.ly link. So all you need to remember is 3QBSMFZ with the appropriate capitalization that you have there. So if you take a screenshot of your screen right now, or if you just write that down, that should be sufficient. The MS is taught at New Orleans' Tulane downtown campus. And we have 3 different degree options: a 2-year MS program, a 4-year integrated dual degree with the MD program, and a flexible faculty development option for mid-career professionals. And since every single class of ours is done through live teleconferencing, that means that anyone in New Orleans, Louisiana, the United States, or the world is capable of taking our coursework. We have 2 tracks, one in bioethics, in which you can develop skills in teaching, research, and service, so you can help in ethics committee work, IRBs, teaching in healthcare settings, and conducting research in healthcare issues, and the medical humanities track, which focuses on teaching and research on those aspects of narrative, reflective writing, fine arts, and history applied to healthcare. If you have any questions, Dr. Stephen Hansen is our new Director of Graduate Studies with his email there. And Sofie Offengenden is the MS Program Coordinator. And our web link, which is really easy, is just tulane.edu/bioethics. Before I turn this over to Sonia Malhotra, I want to again convey the gratitude of Tulane University School of Medicine to the Williams family for setting up this generous endowment to allow us to have panels like this. Sonia.
Thank you, Dr. Dukas. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Dr. Sonia Malhotra. I'm an Associate Professor of Internal Medicine and Pediatrics, and I serve as Director of the Palliative Medicine Program at University Medical Center, as well as Tulane School of Medicine. Today, I am honored as part of the clinical faculty for the bioethics program to introduce our speakers. First, Father Anthony, Reverend Anthony D. Concilis is a member of the Congregation of Holy Cross. After a career in higher education as a family Institute at Ochsner Health, the Institute of Medicine, Education, and Spirituality. And I have been privileged to teach as part of this institute that was so beautifully constructed. Our second speaker will be Reverend Abina Johnson, who is the manager of clinical pastoral education at University Medical Center, New Orleans. She is an ACPE certified educator, a board certified chaplain, and an ordained minister with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, and an all-around dynamic person who I get to work with pretty closely at UMC. And then Father Kevin Dyer is a chaplain at Jesuit High School in New Orleans, Louisiana. He served as a chaplain at University Medical Center from March to May of 2020 when we were undergoing our surge of the COVID pandemic. And to meet him is to love him. And I don't think anybody at the hospital does not love Father Dyer. I do also want to start the presentation by recognizing a few things. We can't do any presentation without recognizing the spirituality of the people who we serve on this land, the Native Indians who own this land. And I want to give a special remembrance to the Chitimacha tribe of Louisiana, the Coushatta tribe of Louisiana, the Jena Band of Choctaw Indians, and the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. And just a little phrase to honor them. The Chitimacha tribe of Louisiana is the only Louisiana tribe to still live on a section of their original homeland, with a reservation located near the town of Charenton, approximately 2 hours from New Orleans, Louisiana. The Chitimacha exerted much influence over the Southeast region at the time of contact with European settlers, but were embroiled in a 12-year war against the French in the early 18th century. As a result, many members were enslaved, killed, and displaced south and westward. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the tribe pushed for land titles from the US government, but only a few hundred acres were then granted in 1916. Since that point, the Chitimacha tribe has purchased additional land in the area and today own over 900 acres. And so no lecture on spirituality during any sort of crisis is complete without paying reverence to those who have really sort of owned this land and to whom we own for being on this land. I also want to note one thing. This panel is not representative of all the religions and spiritualities that we serve in our very diverse area of New Orleans, Louisiana. And so I pay homage to all of those individuals. I also, just for housekeeping, please keep yourself muted. And if you have any questions, please feel free to chat them. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Father Anthony.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I came to New Orleans 16 years ago, and I feel like now I am a part of the New Orleans community. When I was president, I was able to sit on the levy board for quite a few years, as well as chair of private and public universities, their board. So I got to know education here in New Orleans, as well as in some of the social functions of New Orleans. 10 years ago, I was asked to join Ochsner Health System, which is now Ochsner Health. And the academic official there, Dr. Pinsky, along with that president who's now in private work, asked me to join and me one thing: make your own job description up and we will look at it and then you can do what you would wish to do. So I said to them, thank you very much, and I will think about it. And out of that came this Institute for Medicine, Education, and Spirituality. And here is the definition I used for spirituality, which I'm sure all of you will come up with other definitions, but this is the one I've been using. I like it a lot. It's from a sister, Sandra Snyder, and it's this: spirituality is a profound and authentic desire in humanity to find wholeness in the face of fragmentation, community in the face of isolation and loneliness, liberating transcendence in the face of grounded and finite immanence, meaning in life in the face of meaninglessness, and values and virtues that endure in the face of that which is temporary. From that definition, which, by the way, she gave me full permission to use, I developed some programs that I believe may or can help everyone at Ochsner. While I'm a Roman Catholic priest, I do not function in chaplaincy at all, or only when people call upon me that I know. But I work with the administration and with everyone else who wants to work with us in trying to look at the question of meaning, character, and the use of virtues, use and understanding of virtue. What that comes down to for me is moral order. Looking at the practice of medicine and the practice of healthcare administration from a moral point of view and from a character point of view. So Pope John the 23rd, I'm sorry, I left a 10 out of there. Pope John Paul 23rd wrote this about moral order. The order which prevails in society is by nature moral, grounded as it is in truth. It must function according to the norms of justice. It should be inspired and perfected by mutual love. And finally, it should be brought to an ever more refined and human balance in full freedom. I took those words, justice, mutual love, and balance in full freedom, and I try to develop programs out of them. So people will begin to ingest the need for this quality of living. Recently, Pope Francis wrote, a worldwide tragedy like COVID-19 pandemic momentarily received the sense that we are a global community, all in the same boat, where one person's problems are the problems of all. Once more, we realize that no one is saved alone. We can only be saved together. This is the moral order function, clearly promulgated by Pachamenteris. And then he went on, Pope John Paul went on, when the relations of human society are expressed in terms of rights and duties, people become conscious of spiritual values and understand the meaning and the significance of truth, justice, charity, and freedom. There you go, that same 3-4 words that come together in this moral order. Truth moving into justice, charity, and freedom. They become deeply aware that they belong to the world of values. And when I began understanding that world of values, I began to think of the times I worked in the streets with drug addicts for quite a few years, and with alcoholic, terribly destroyed persons because of alcohol in Portland, Oregon. And I began to understand that healthcare tries to remediate some of this, but sometimes we get lost with our values and have to kind of understand our values. So moreover, when moved by such concerns, they are brought to the best knowledge of the true God who is personal and transcendent. Now, those of you who work in secular institutions, that is, like I do, know that the word transcendent sometimes takes on a difficult frame. So I have to be very careful on words that I use. And so I got this chart, probably summarizes a good deal of my work. As you know, I'm a psychologist, a teaching psychologist. My PhD and dissertation was on altruism and the development of pro-social behavior. So I looked at a meso, took the 3 words of a meso. If you can scroll up just a little bit, Sonia, the 3 words of a meso, scroll up. No, I'm so sorry. I'm using the wrong thing. Sorry. Scroll down. Thank you. Medicine, one down more, please. Education and spirituality. The 3 words that seemed to me, when I wrote the proposal for the president of Ochsner, it seemed to me were most appropriate on dealing with values, and more than values, virtues. So I got to think about historical frames and how we have developed these ideas of values. The transcendental words that have been used for centuries, truth, goodness, and beauty, seem to fit for me. And so I wrote a lot about the truth, goodness, and beauty, and as it related to the 3 areas that I dealt with, medicine and truth. So medicine to me is the truth. We do research, we look at justice from the point of view of telling the truth in healthcare and in medicine. So I went to psychologists that I think are, how would I put, prominent today, Peterson and Seligman. And they wrote this wonderful book, it's a very large book, on their research on character and virtue. And so I related the word medicine with truth and with the virtues of wisdom, which carry the perspective, carry the character strengths of perspective taking, curiosity, and knowledge. And I related the word justice, which has the character strengths of fairness and leadership and truth, to both medicine and the expression of truth. I'll speak to how I implemented this in a little while with medical students. The word education, for me, having been in education for as long as I can remember, I was the academic vice president and dean at one of the largest theological schools. And I learned so much about the integration of education and the practice of ministry. And the word that always came out to me that summarized much of this idea of education is that we are seeking goodness in students, in professionals. We're seeking to revive this notion of what is the good and how do we describe this good that we all seek after. And the words in virtue that I began to integrate with this are courage, humanity, and temperance. Courage being that virtue which looks at the integrity of the human person and the persistence of the human person. Humanity is what we always think of in medicine as beneficence and benevolence, but this is the word that the secular psychologists use, humanity, compassion empathy, love, kindness. And then the word that is most difficult for all of us, and we're finding this out today more and more in our politics and the variety of things that we're facing, and that's temperance. I use the word equilibrium to teach it because temperance has so many connotations in our society. But temperance takes in forgiveness, humility, prudence, and self-regulation. So as I began to understand education, I began to relate it to seeking the good or goodness. So I talked to the administration here about our path to goodness. And now we're developing programs on diversity and equity that's coming directly from the administration and not through MESO necessarily. I have one more word, Sonia, to do. And that is the word spirituality. And I read also already how I defined or pretty much defined spirituality, not to exclude transcendence, religion, but I find it's easier to talk about beauty and the beauty of the human person, the beauty of the interaction between the physician and the patient, the beauty between the med student and the faculty. Beauty is the expression of that spirituality, which is in all of us, which expresses in all of us. Now, the psychologists use the word transcendence, and it looks at transcendence for them, looks at hope or appreciation of beauty, gratitude, and they also have hope they have the word spirituality, which for them, they sort of talk about religion and spirituality and kind of cubbyhole it, the word spirituality, perhaps just in religious expression. We can go up now. Thank you. We can go down. I'm sorry, I got the up and down right. We can go down. Now, this is what I'm working at now, and I'm starting to publish some of this because IMESO has contracted with the University of Queensland, who is the medical school for Ochsner. Ochsner is the clinical school. And what I do is teach a course, which is a required course for graduation for all our medical students that come from Ochsner at Queensland. And Queensland has adopted a form of the program that I've developed on teaching virtue and values to medical students. I don't have time now to go into it deeply, but it's a 7-week course that looks at virtue and the integration and reflection on virtue in the medical students' lives. They have to write self-reflections based on what I'm going to go over very quickly now with you. I am pleased to say we have looked at we worked with 725 medical students so far. The depth of that is that many of these students call back and talk to us when they're in their residencies, which is a wonderful thing. Now, Dr. Malhotra taught one class. We bring in other people, a lawyer and myself, and now another physician run these programs, which we've pretty much got down now to a science. So for the word, in healthcare, it seems to me, justice can be expressed in the word equity. Equanimity can talk about temperance, not to exclude other areas, but to reflect on what temperance truly means in terms of hope and forgiveness and partially gratitude. Meaning is transcendence. We talk about meaning as a transcendent experience. Love is the pulling out of one's desire or vocation. We have all the students write about their vocation, not as a doctor, not as a profession, but what drives them to be who they are, which brings about the question of meaning. Truth is certainly part of Messo's way of looking at research. And we have some of the students do research on these concepts, which they readily do. Beneficence certainly is a sense of humanity, beneficence and benevolence. It's certainly part of what I like to do in dealing with altruism, which I think is core to the life of medicine. Authenticity is courage, being integral, saying what one really believes, standing up for one's behavior, and then circumspection is wisdom. So I think I'm pretty much taking my time, but I wanted just to share a little bit of this with you in terms of the novel way of looking at moral order and translated into professionalism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Father Anthony. With that, we'll move on to Reverend Abina's presentation.
Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here with y'all, and thank you so much for the invitation. So I will start it off by talking a little bit about what chaplains do and what we kind of are, because I feel like some people know and some people kind of don't. So I am a board certified chaplain, as Dr. Malhotra said, and basically what that means is I am going into hospital rooms, going up on floors, dealing with staff, dealing with patients, dealing with visitors, and being able to offer emotional and spiritual support on an interfaith level. So that's kind of what chaplains do, period. And we do it at hospitals, we do it in hospice, we do it on prisons and jails, we do it on the streets, we do it in Congress. I mean, keep on going. So that's what we try to do. So my job here at University Medical Center, New Orleans, is that I run the clinical pastoral education program. So I have a few residents, we have 7 right now, and they do 24/7 in-house coverage. So what that means is we have a phone and we get called, and whoever calls us, it could be anyone from family, it could be a patient, it could be staff member, we go. So, and we offer support in whatever way that we can. Most of the residents that come into clinical pastoral education, we call it CPE for short, come after their undergrad and then their graduate degree. And a lot of them actually come as like a second or third career. So that's kind of like when you see chaplains kind of running around, well, chaplains don't run, we walk, walking around. Just know that there's a lot that came before coming into the program, and it is for a year. And we, for COVID, we're a new program. I've only been here for a year and a half, and definitely the requests skyrocketed, I think, when COVID hit. So I'm looking forward to talking to you all about this and being able to answer questions. Okay, I wanted to start off with the ethical principles. So the ones that I teach and the ones that I normally kind of focus out of are 6, and we have a strong policy also against proselytizing. So to start off, I think of non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, justice, truthfulness, and dignity. Ones chaplains, particularly board certified chaplains, there's like pages upon pages upon pages of more like professional ethics guidelines, and then what you want to do as a chaplain when you're working with patients and staff, and then as a chaplain when you're working with colleagues. So I think the 3 things I want to make sure that I point out here is the first, do no harm. So that is really important for us and really important for me. I do think that ethics kind of comes out from you personally and then like goes into the world. So do no harm through acts of omission or commission. So for me, that means I want to make sure that whatever I am providing to the hospital and to the people here, it is interfaith, that anyone can kind of sit in on anything that we do and get something out of it, something that will actually help their spirituality, something that will help their meaning making. And that is, to me, the my definition of spirituality, meaning making, and how you do that. So to make sure of that, the second thing is to always ask what people need. I think that ensures against any paternalism. I don't want to say, well, I think you really need this, right? I kind of want you to tell me, well, Abina, this is what I need. And we got a lot of staff members saying, hey, we need this, we need that. And it was really good conversations that happened where we were able to say, okay, so you need that, sure, we can make sure that happens, we can make sure that other thing happens. And then we got a lot of things from patients and family members too, of them being like, hey, I just need someone to talk. We need someone to come and do like a quick service. Can someone call us on the phone? I mean, and being able to say, sure, we can definitely do that. And how can we kind of change around our schedules to accommodate your guys' needs? So things like that. And the last piece of this is the dignity piece. For me, chaplaincy is different from being a pastor in a way that I think a pastor is all about, okay, we both kind of agree on particular belief system. And I want to make sure that I am preaching to you in that belief system so that what I believe, you also believe and you understand it. Whereas chaplaincy is more like, okay, you tell me what your faith is, what kind of gives meaning to your life, and I will support that regardless of what my actual personal faith is. So I'm a Baptist minister, but I also work with a lot of Wiccans, and I work with a lot of Catholics, and a lot of other types of Baptists, and just you kind of keep on going down the line. So for me, dignity has a lot to do with confidentiality also. So there's some things that I will probably know a lot more about patients and staff members that will kind of come up in charting necessarily, or with other people. So they might tell me things and I'm like, okay, well, if that doesn't kind of connect really strongly with kind of like what the interdisciplinary team kind of needs to know, then that's okay. We can keep that between us, and figuring out that line is part of the training. So we respect diversity. As I said before, there's no proselytizing. It's actually a fireable offense. So we do not do that. And all of our opportunities that we created during COVID, and we're kind of still doing some of it now, of course, because we're still in the heights of COVID. But we want to create opportunities that honor the care receivers meaning all of the people that we work with, that we provide well-being, that we provide choices, equity, integrity, and positive regard. That's a little hint to my Carl Rogers kind of background and how I work with people. And we are in-house, and I do think it's vital. I think we do need chaplains to be here to provide emotional and spiritual support to everyone. Okay, so our spiritual care response was informed by the ethics that I just kind of talked about and the stated needs of individuals, of units and service lines, departments. So what we started off with was soul activities. That was kind of like our name for it. And we kind of called it blank for the soul. And each one of the chaplains kind of chose something that they'd really believed in, that they were like, you know what, I can definitely offer this, particularly to the inpatient units. So we did tea for the soul, a mindfulness meditation for the soul, and then songs for the soul. And we did that throughout the whole hospital. And it went really well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But one thing that for me was missing was like everyone else, like clinics, people who necessarily aren't up on the units, and then if we have any visitors, wanted to make sure that people had that. And so we created a labyrinth, and I have a picture of it, so y'all will get to see that. And we got, I think the night crew really liked the labyrinth. It was in the Interfaith Chapel down here in the hospital. We also did remembrance jars for the ICUs, which were like where most of the COVID patients were. And that came directly from staff members kind of not really complaining, but just really recognizing that they didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye to so many people that they had to say goodbye to. And so one of the chaplains actually created these beautiful jars, and they had blocks in them, and people could like write in. It's kind of like an artistic thing, write in either initials or symbols and just put it in the jars. And then there was like a wonderful kind of service around that. The marketing department created a respite room. And so we sat in there for roughly an hour, a little bit, maybe over an hour a day during the weekday. So if anyone wanted to come in and talk to chaplains, didn't want to come necessarily find us or call us on the phone, that they could. And then we had memorial services, one for staff and one for patients. And then we did a lot of family phone calls. We actually called every COVID family member that the phone numbers in the chart, we called them, and those were really inspiring, but also quite sad calls. A lot of them were, but it also helped, I think, the grieving process to continue in a healthy way for so many families who kind of needed that check-in again from the hospital. I know we were not the only ones calling. I do know that palliative care were doing calls also. But yeah, so that's kind of just an overview. So what we do as chaplains is we diagnose care receivers' primary unmet spiritual need, and we provide an intervention. So a spiritual assessment is different from a screening, right? So when you do screenings, you kind of like check off like, okay, so do you have a connection to this? Do you have a connection to that? Tell me about this, tell me about that. Whereas the assessment is we're really trying to figure out, based on peer-reviewed assessment models already, like what is it that's your primary unmet need? So yeah, you might have a lot of spiritual needs right now. You know, you're in the hospital or you're working here, and it might be kind of stressful having to figure out like how do you take care of yourself while in a pandemic, and what does that look like for you to kind of be there for your patients. So to figure out, okay, so what is it that you really need? And then we're actually going to do something towards that. Okay, so our For the Soul activities, meditation. Actually, let me start off with, I'm starting with meditation for the soul. So meditation for the soul, we had roughly like a little over 400 people to attend those. And it normally happened either in break rooms on those floors or in other kind of like quiet rooms. And the staff would come. It was normally for staff, and they would come and they would sit for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes and be in this beautiful kind of space where they could kind of just be and not have to do so much. We also did songs for the soul. We had, I think, over 500 people come to those, and that was really well attended. And then the one that kind of like skyrocketed, I think everyone really loved it, was Tea for the Soul. We had over 1,000 people. And I still get, hey, can we do that? And I'm like, eventually. But people really, really loved it. And yeah, so I was just really happy to see that not only were people asking for more support, but when we offered it and actually delivered it, that they actually did come and partake. And that was really wonderful. Okay. So the mindfulness meditation piece, we did it around the 5 senses. Some of you probably already, anyone who kind of has done mindfulness meditation kind of knows, I think, a little bit more about the 5 senses reflection. But it's basically you go through like touch, sight, sound, smell, taste. And a lot of it is kind of closed eyes. There's really wonderful calming music in the background, either harps or something like that. It's like instrumental music. So you're not being distracted by words necessarily. Making sure that it's, of course, interfaith. And you slowly go through like, what am I feeling right now? Like, do I feel the chair underneath my feet? Do I feel the floor? What am I seeing right now? And it could be, the back of people's eyelids. What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I tasting on my tongue? So it really grounds people, because we heard a lot that there was a lot of anxiety, right? A lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of what ifs. And that helps people to really ground in the moment, in the here and now, instead of the there and then. And then of course there was one-on-ones for anyone who was interested in doing like just one-on-one meditation practice, or just to talk to the chaplain afterwards confidentially. Okay, songs for the soul. So there were lots of songs. I only jotted down like 3 of them. But we started off with an interfaith prompt. So basically just something to think about, and then played the song. And then, as you can see on the left, there's she's dancing to the song. But then there were some discussion questions, and so people just kind of like answered based on, and just more about how they were connecting to the song, how they're connecting to the music, and what that meant for like their day-to-day lives in the hospital. And then we did themed coloring pages, which was just an exercise to not necessarily talk, but just to sit with the feeling of how you're feeling and be really meditative around that. You can also use mandalas. Those are really good. Those are very old and a very great way of kind of just meditating with color and yeah, not having to think so much, because I think a lot of people were thinking. And then of course, one-on-ones. And the last little one is Tea for the Soul. So these are some pictures from them. So again, music, interfaith. We had art therapy cookies. Some people did like all the coloring of the cookies, and some people just like, you know what, I really just want to sit and munch my cookie and sip my tea and just be able to talk. And that was, you know, it's like, sure, whatever you need, right? There were easels with a thematic quote. So either if we were going to talk about peace that day or kindness or things like that. And then some prompts to kind of get people started. There was one story I heard where a staff member, their cookie was, one side was, this is how I feel now. And the other side was, and this is how I feel like after 3 hours. And it was like one part was really chaotic and the other part was really neat and tidy. And so it was like a really good way of like them being able to like talk about how they were feeling and what they were thinking, and not to be judged, right? Like not to be judged, not to worry about like, oh my goodness, if I say this, then like, will any part of me be in jeopardy, like my job or anything? It's like, no, like it's real. Whatever you're feeling is very real and you're not alone in that. And here's the labyrinth. So we created this because it was kind of like, let's get something down. And this is our chapel. So for those who don't know, the labyrinth is found in many religious traditions. It's a meandering path. It's normally very circular, and I tried to make it circular as much as possible with what I had. But it has one single entrance and a circular route, and it represents unity, wholeness, and infinity. And there were suggestions for first-time walkers. So I'll just say quickly like what the suggestion was. We put down that it is good. So this is while you're walking it, right? To think. It is good to quiet your mind and stay focused in the present moment. Observe your physical sensations. Feel your breath as you inhale and exhale. Notice whether any parts of your body are tight or uncomfortable. Feel the air on your skin. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the present moment as you are able. Simply be. This is a sacred place. We hope that you find and experience what you seek. So it's very open-ended. It's very come and do what you need to do and take out a few minutes from your hectic day, hectic days, and be. Okay, this is the respite room. So this is kind of, and marketing did all of this. They did such an amazing job. But yeah, this is where we kind of sat and people would come and talk or come, and they had these wonderful cards from the community just supporting the staff, and that was really amazing. I've already talked a little bit about the remembrance jars. I will speak a little bit about the unit-specific memorial services. So that was for staff, because we would normally have like a big hospital-wide memorial service for staff, but because of COVID and all the restrictions of social distancing, it's like, okay, well, how can we kind of change that up, but still provide what the units are asking for? So we actually did some service lines, but then mostly the unit particular services where we were able to talk about the patients, and the staff was able to kind of say their kind of like goodbyes in a way where they were connected to the story of the patient, and here maybe this staff member had this part of the story, this other staff member had the other part. So that was really, really wonderful to kind of hear about and to see. And then we have a memorial service actually on Thursday for all of the, well, not all the patients, but the majority of the patients. I think it's going to be really needed, I think, for the community. I've already started getting back some cards of just people just saying how grateful they are for that. So yeah.
Thank you, Reverend Abina.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate
it.
That's an amazing amount of work. If you can stop sharing your screen, I'm going to put one image up for Father Dyer. Okay. Father Dyer, all yours.
Can everybody hear me? Thanks. Okay, good. So I got into this job kind of by chance and very quickly when everything started to lock down. A lot of the stuff I was responsible for at the high school went away. And so working with Dr. W and my religious superior, I was able to arrange the work over at UMC. And because we had a rectory downtown on Barone Street that was being minimally used, I was able to live there and not worry about, getting any of the other priests that I live with sick. So I want to share one experience, a limited experience, but one which impacted my idea of spirituality. So early on, life as a Jesuit, I realized you never ask the person you're visiting if they want to say a prayer. Well, if they are in fairly bad circumstances. Because the first time I ever did that, I said, "Oh, would you like to say a prayer?" And the person said, "Oh, yes. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to." It's the meal prayer that is commonly used. But I couldn't learn after one experience. So the second time I go in and say, "Would you like to say a prayer?" And once again, "Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts." And I realized, that when people are in a certain compromised state, shall we say, that they go back to experiences, memories, practices, words that are most deeply ingrained. And what is more deeply ingrained than the prayer that you say before every meal of your life? So with that in mind, as I was quickly packing and moving out of this community to move into the new community, one of the last things I did was grabbed a box of holy cards that we had made at the high school, the image which you see there on the screen. And I just brought it with me, thought maybe it would come in handy. And so, in the ministry to the patients, I was working mainly with Catholic patients who wanted a priest to visit them. Of course, a number in the ICU, a number of the COVID patients, given the way the disease worked, who were elderly and various stages of dementia. And so I always had a little pack that I had with me, with a rosary, a little Q-tip to do the anointing of the sick, and with that image. And I would give the image to them. And just wanted to share with you a series of experiences with patients, all of whom who had dementia. And the first person I'm thinking of, I placed that card in his hands, and this shock of recognition, I would describe, comes over his face, and just stares at it. Someone who was not focused, was not communicative, has a certain centering or slight integration of the self, looking on this image. Another patient, also dementia, I give him that card, and he looks at it, points to it, and then just points at himself, points at his heart. And again, staring at the image. A third similar kind of thing, and also grabbed my hand when he saw that I was a priest, and came and kissed my gloved hand, grabbed it and kissed it there in the hospital room. And that series of experiences got me thinking just about the nature of an image, the way we connect in terms of spirituality, because all of these patients were, given the circumstances, not able to connect with family the way that they normally would. And it was through this image that some series of memories and a system of meaning came up into their mind, resulting in, in all the cases I'm mentioning, a greater calm, a greater peace, at least from my judgment, my perception. Of course, none very communicative that they could say what they were experiencing. I'm just going on observation here. But I think it says something about all people in the way that we retrieve our identities, I guess, and that certain images can bring up a series of memories, perhaps reintegrate them within us, allow us to situate ourselves in a situation. And I think it's important just because, in so many of the cases and the experiences that I had, I found myself working under limits, the limit of, the person's mental state, the limit of the amount of time I could spend in the room, the limit of all sorts. Imagine all the different limits of time and circumstance. And so under those circumstances, how do we communicate? And, I thought of, in some cases it's just touch, and to hold a person's hand. Some cases, it's the image, it's presence. And a lot of times with the staff, the connection was more of presence, because, you have, 1,500 people that work at the hospital. Now you've put masks on all of them. There's no way that you can meet everybody. I had the most horrible time trying to remember names, but I could be present, and I could, I had 2 legs and could, make my way up and down the hallways. So just that personal presence can communicate in a way, the human presence, and also words, and not words so much in the way of a conversation. There were plenty of deep conversations. There was plenty of, going through issues in ways people understood, but also words, for instance, one elderly patient that I had visited a number of times, but she progressively got worse, and knew that her native language was Tamil, and so and a Catholic, and so we were able to work with some of the medical staff at the hospital to find somebody who could say the Hail Mary prayer in Tamil, so that we could record that and just play it for her there in her room. And again, that shock of recognition, going back to something, very deep within the person's psyche, of a native language, united with these core images and beliefs they understood their lives, world. So, there's so many, there's so many different avenues that even just this one little experience has set my own mind and thought in terms of ministry. But I'll just leave it. I'll leave it right there, because people might have some conversation that they want to get under. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Dyer. And I just want to say, as a practicing Hindu Sikh woman, the value of chaplaincy for me has been made so apparent in my father's own illness, to have someone play Hindu hymns and meditations. And, so I guess I'm going to start with that question, and really brief answers, as to what is the difference between religiosity versus spirituality? Because this comes up a lot with everyone. And how does chaplaincy fit into that? And I think Reverend Abina, you answered that beautifully, but I'd just be curious, from Father Dyer, Father Anthony, or Reverend Abina, any one of you to take that question.
Yeah, I kind of uses the way I make distinctions is from a oratorian writer named Louis Bouillet in his Introduction to Spirituality, who distinguishes the interior, the spiritual, and the religious life. Meaning the interior life, any attempt that we make to integrate our lives more to find meaning, from a poet to anyone else. The spiritual life coming in anytime we recognize that integration has reference to a transcendent point of some kind. And then the religious life kicking in when we believe that transcendent point is the source of a system of practices, images, beliefs that exist both over time and space. And so, you get adept, I guess, at trying to evaluate very quickly where in that whole system you find yourself with a certain patient. Some it's easier because they say, okay, this is where I'm coming from. Others you have to figure that out on the fly.
Great. Thank you so much. Father Anthony, I'm going to give this question to you, if it's okay, because Dr. Gershon asks, how far back do we need to go to find a morally functioning society? Does this even exist? Is the social order more a struggle between morality and its absence? Father Anthony, I think you're on mute right now.
When we look at the whole issue of nurture and nature, and from my point of view, spending so much time on the virtues, I have to ask that question about what were we born with? Was there some ground of being that we had when we were born? And from my research in psychology, certainly cooperation is there for utilitarian reasons in some ways. But we learn to be charitable. We learn to be empathetic. We learn these things without denying that our human nature is good. And so I work with words all the time because I think it's the only thing we have to deal with, is to try to define things and understand them. So I want to go back to the religiosity issue and to continue answering that. Because I think some people, you're either spiritual or you're religious, but you can't be both. And that is not the nature of it. Some tend to be a little more religious in orientation because of background, because of what they've learned. Others, like some of the medical students, they look at me with the blank face when they first see the collar, me teaching this class. And they're saying, ooh, is this going to be a religious class? And at the end of it, they say, you didn't talk about religion. How come? And if they bring it up, I'll talk about it. But the point I want to make is we can't deny that we're religious in order to be able to be spiritual. I think they live together. And I think they live together well. And I think they need each other.
Thank you. I have a question from one of our bioethics faculty, and Reverend Abina, I'm going to direct this to you. How do you feel about the duty of practitioners and healthcare systems to provide bereavement support for families? This is not something built into medicine by any stretch. Yes, in hospice, but not in other systems. And do you feel medicine is required to do this, or that they should refer families into the community services? What is the least that healthcare practitioners should do?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I definitely think that something should be done. And I definitely do think that it should be done from the hospital side. I love that hospice has something already baked in. It makes complete sense to me. I do think that that's what a lot of chaplaincy has been doing during COVID, is like kind of bridging that gap, and being able to kind of reach out and offer support in whatever way that we could, and that we can. For me, yeah, I think it's vital. I think it's so important not to just end, I don't know about care, because I kind of don't like saying end care, right? Because I don't think we actually do end care. But I guess what I know, that there's so many families that I have heard from that are like, oh, you know what, we just needed a little bit more, and it was so helpful to get that little bit more. And so I know that there's like the financial aspect of that, and it's more than just like a heart thing, right? But I get to kind of be the heart thing. So I'm just gonna say that, like, yeah, I do think that a little bit more probably, and how to do that, I'm not exactly certain. But I'm guessing that hospice could probably lead us, help to have that conversation a little bit more.
One of the
gonna
things
just-
that I try to do is to help understand their own attitude toward their faith, their attitude toward medicine, their attitude toward interpersonal communication. And I try not to pigeonhole people in or talks. So I've just finished a series of workshops for all the project management staff. We have 22 of them, and that really work with a lot of people. And we never really spoke about spirituality, but we spoke about the right thing. So I'm going to just quote, and by the way, we do this with nurses and with physicians. I think I've done 25 workshops this year in 2020 on just helping people to examine without having the title of chaplain, because sometimes that's problematic sometimes. So this is what Pope Francis wrote recently. The pain, the uncertainty and fear, and the realization of our own limitations brought on by the pandemic have only made it all the more urgent that we rethink our styles of life, our relationships, the organization of our societies, and above all, the meaning of our existence. So I just gave a talk to the chaplains at Vanderbilt, and they wanted me to talk about gratitude, about the research in gratitude, about what gratitude does to us to help us through this pandemic. And I found that the people who work in chaplaincy, spiritual care, my first doctorate is in spiritual care. So I know a little bit about spiritual care and chaplaincies and that kind of thing. And I spent 4 years at a university as a chaplain. But I've learned the universality of the human heart treats faith as one sector, and it has to be integrated into all the other sectors of life. And that's the hard part of it. That's the difficulty.
Absolutely, that's beautiful.
Doctors have to integrate it, but they don't know how in many cases. So that's what we as professionals have to help in talking about it.
Well, Father Anthony, you just led into my last questions. I know we're running just a little bit over. I just want to take a minute to answer this question because I think it's a very important one. And I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Michelle Christopher, my colleague at Hail Mary in Thummel. So this question is from Christian Goodwin. I'm a current medical student. What do you wish new clinicians and trainees understood better about chaplaincy and the role it plays in healing? And just a quick few second answer on that, please.
Well, I'll say really quickly, when you look at the statistics, most people who say they're non-religious believe in nature, believe in God, believe in some sect, some part of spirituality. And I think that we all kind of need to start having those conversations with people. How is your spirituality? How is your meaning making impacting your illness?
Father Dyer, Father Anthony, any last thoughts that you have on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, the spiritual care plays an important role in the person's whole healing. Um, when there was when there was good communication amongst the different stakeholders involved, and I know Dr. Malhotra, you are always working in that area too, just in your field in palliative. The more communication there is amongst all the people involved, the better the outcomes.
Just recently, one of our very great, wonderful physicians who deals with cancer and end-of-life issues a lot, but not in palliative care. She wrote a book, and she invited me to edit it. And she wrote to me the other day, out of the blue, perhaps we as are more past credit for.
It's absolutely beautiful. I want to thank you all for taking the time to be at this lecture. I know we're at 6 minutes past the hour. There's one other question that Father Anthony, I will send to you and connect you to Dr. Gershon, because I think that will be helpful. I just want to thank you all for being here. And I also want to pay remembrance to the over 400,000 lives we have lost in this pandemic. Let us all think about those individuals and how we can make the spirituality and the care of their families better, since we're still in this COVID pandemic. And I thank you all for all the hard work you're doing to make sure that patients and families are well taken care of. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
And thank you to our panelists.
Welcome. Thank you.